You're listening to the Unlocking Africa podcast.
Propel has been the next phase of my evolution as a person. I know this almost makes it sound like there is not much to me outside of work, but I'm someone who is fully dedicated to my purpose anyway. So these companies fall into a sort of gray zone where they are deprived of access to a steady stream of talent. And what we started realizing is that we were becoming a talent pipeline partner. Your problem can easily be solved by tapping into this direct talent pipeline that takes you into the veins of the ecosystem directly. And every learning comes in form of a challenge in that case, and how you respond to it determines how far you go.
Stay tuned as we bring you inspiring people who are unlocking Africa's economic potential. You're listening to the Unlocking Africa podcast with your host, Tessa Adamu.
Welcome to the Unlocking Africa podcast, where we find amazing people who are doing amazing things to unlock Africa's economic potential. Today, we have Sunkanmi Ola, who is co-founder and CEO at Propel, a platform which has built one of the largest ecosystems of tech developer communities in Africa. Welcome to the podcast, Sunkanmi. How are you?
I'm very fine. Thank you so much.
It's a pleasure to have you on the podcast. Where are you at the moment?
Oh, right now I'm in the beautiful city of Lagos.
Oh, fantastic. As we get into the conversation, I was hoping you could introduce yourself and tell us a bit more about Sunkanmi.
Okay. Sunkanmi is a simple guy, I guess. That's what I believe. I've always been an entrepreneur. I finished from university in 2012. I was born and raised in Nigeria. And up until my university level, I spent it all here in Lagos. Started my first company called Syracuse Africa, which is a digital creative agency. Stepped away from that and left it in the hands of an amazing team that runs the management and growth of the company till today, and set out on my journey with all my learnings to build out Propel. Propel has been the next phase of my evolution as a person. And I know this almost makes it sound like there is not much to me outside of work, but I'm someone who is fully dedicated to my purpose anyway. But yes, started building up Propel a few years ago, set up the team sometime between 2019 and 2020. But mentally, Propel had been in my head for a while already, and already tested out iterations, did a lot of observation, a lot of research, a lot of talking about, the weight of the idea in my head as well. And, pulled in my co-founders somewhere around 2019, 2020. We set up, first of all, in Portugal, and then we moved it to Berlin, which is where we wanted to be anyway. So we raised our first funding from Berlin. We went through an accelerator called APX, which is Axel Springer and Porsche. And we started growing from there. And, the rest has brought us to where we are today.
You mentioned that Propel was something that was always in your mind. So what was the inspiration behind Propel?
Yeah, I'll say this started from the period while building out my first company. And being an agency, a fully bootstrapped agency, we caught a good wind at multiple points while growing the company. And this good wind came in terms of, landing major clients, hitting major milestones. And what all these things did was scale the team very quickly. And we faced this at so many points, but I realized I wouldn't say we had it easy, but it seemed quite straightforward. And the reason for this is I'm not a developer. I'm not a technical person. I'm a strategy person, but I've always been in the midst of technical people. All my friends, classmates from school, most of them ended up as software developers or product developers in some way or the other. And it was always easy to, build out a technical team, even if it was just on a project basis or on demand, by simply making a couple of phone calls. And what I realized was, your network determines how well you can build when it comes to a team. But at the same time, I sort of noticed that a lot of people did not have this access, because if you don't know good people cannot make referrals to other good people. And when it comes to building a company or building a business, the quality of your people, the quality of your team is a huge determinant in how far you go. So I decided I would like this little privilege I've been able to be exposed to in this tiny little way in running my own tiny company to be something that every business, both within and outside of Africa, to be able to access. So the initial idea started out like a marketplace. find good people, put them in a place where they are easily accessible. And then one thing would lead to another naturally when you're designing a model, because you start looking at the reasons why this does not happen naturally yet, right? And the first thing I stumbled upon was, the quality assurance. You don't want your dollars to be at risk if you're going through a platform. And this was in the earliest stages. Propel had not even been set up as a company yet. This was just iterating with different ideas to see how it would work out. And what then happened was, one thing led to another. We decided to build like a quality control algorithm that helped reduce the emphasis on price of labor to the quality of labor. And by doing this, we unconsciously built a platform that tied the cost of labor to the cost of supply on the African continent, right? Because we had to build a pricing system into play. And naturally, what we started seeing was more demand from outside Africa because we had tapped into the price arbitrage model while 100% vouching for quality. And then we realized this was something that could become a company. And I decided to pull it out, set it up as a startup, and take it down the venture funding route.
You hit on a key point there that your network is your net worth, and a lot of people did not have access to a wide audience. So, what initial research did you take out to understand there was a need for a platform like this?
Yeah, it's very vast. The research cut across the overall availability and volume, right? Because I would say between 2010 and 2020, there was such a huge explosion on the number of people going into tech. So trying to understand the dynamics behind this, trying to understand what was driving this, trying to see what was sustainable in this, took me across many angles of research. There was the part where one even needed to understand the population metrics. Where is this going? Where has it been in the past 10 years? And where will it be in the next 50 years? And when you conduct research like that, you compare it against the global average. And this is what made us really see very quickly that there is a huge opportunity on the African continent, massive opportunity when it comes to human resources, because population-wise and demographics-wise, we're heading in the opposite direction from most of the developed world, most of Europe, most of North America, where the population trends are directly affecting the volume of the workforce in a negative way. So that is just one part. And, understanding how much does it cost if you want to build A, B, C, D, what does it really take? And how does this compare on, to global standards? And also understanding the, the volume of quality available. If we're talking about a population of XXX, million people, what volume of them are good enough to work in this manner, in that manner? What is the career progression timeline? How quickly are people developing? Who are the players on ground that are involved in nurturing talent, introducing them into the workforce? So it's spanned across a very wide scope. It's not something I say very often, but I think, Propel existed in my head a solid 4 years before even becoming a startup in that sense. But this was a very interesting period because like I always say, this I say more frequently, I had the privilege of time, understanding the space. And it was in this period I also decided to, venture outward, because at this point it was clear what was going to be built was a sort of a global company right from inception. So I took my executive MBA at a global school called Holt International Business School. And my home campus was London, but I kept on doing rotations across multiple continents. So Dubai, the United Arab Emirates, North America, so across New York, San Francisco, and even all the way to Shanghai. And this was just me trying to understand how the global economy worked from the lens of human resources and access to talent. So a lot of research.
Fantastic. It's clear that you have an understanding of the market you're trying to access, but it could be said that talent acquisition and pipeline building is not a new concept. So could you explain what you're doing differently that sets you apart from your competitors?
Yeah, so that's a good question. I did mention the original idea or the manifestation of this idea was a talent marketplace. It was the simplest thing that one could think of back then. And talent marketplaces were a bit commonplace. Building this out, we were able to, call ourselves a startup, and we built out a platform. And naturally, we started trying to drive the exposure of African talent straight into the global workforce. This has a lot of moving parts, as you might imagine, where we talking to small businesses, where we trying to bring on freelancers, or where we're looking at, full-time hires. The scope, even in that regard, was very broad. But the advantage we had going through the accelerator in 2020 was we started really shaping out exactly what the model of the company would be based on what the market said as well. So by trying to sell, we started, closing a few customers across different levels and understanding the needs of companies. And very quickly, we realized, first of all, that also this was just before COVID. So you can imagine that COVID changed the trajectory and the dynamics of how, we were growing. So what we started noticing was we were closing, business with a lot more corporates than we had imagined or that we had assumed. And now this could be looking backwards in hindsight, this could be tied to many reasons. A lot of big companies, if you are a big enough company, but you're not a Google, Amazon, or Microsoft, or, a blue chip company as it's called, you have a lot of huge talent needs, huge appetite with a lot of sustainable growth plans, but you don't have the splash around resources. So you still need to be very cost efficient. So these companies fall into a sort of gray zone where they are deprived of access to a steady stream of talent. And what we started realizing is that we were becoming a talent pipeline partner. Now, these are not companies or businesses that need a marketplace. What they need is a talent pipeline partner that could help them fill their pipelines to keep them growing in a sustainable way. These are also companies that are very used to internationalization and globalization. And even though it wasn't easy at first, and COVID really made things, a bit easier for us, these are companies that are also open to the idea of building global workforces. So at some point, we scrapped the marketplace because the product and the business were heading in two different directions. One was a marketplace for gigs, freelancers, and the rest, while the other was a placement partner to the actual customers who were paying. So we did something very interesting in 2021 where we reworked our entire model and let the business lead what the product would become, meaning the product will be able to facilitate, scale what the business was doing. And this is a very important thing that a lot of startups also struggle with, where the key model is not really supported by the product. So your product ends up being a nice to have, not a need to have. So we scrapped it. It was a bold decision and a gamble, but thankfully it's worked. Around the same period where this was happening, we also realized something unique on the supply side because we have been thinking a lot about skill. We do not train, we only identify people and move them into the pipeline after multiple assessments and verifications and what have you. And we realized if we wanted to scale, we needed to be able to tap into a flowing river, not try to create the river by ourselves. And this flowing river ended up being communities. So tech talent communities are something that are very unique to emerging market ecosystems where people tend to band together because it is the way to break into a new field or to break into a new path. You're coming out of school, or you're coming into, a working age, and you want to determine what part of tech you go into. You want to be maybe a product developer, you want to be a PM, you want to be a QA, you want to be a software engineer. Usually you need someone to bounce these ideas off, someone to talk to, or sometimes a group of people. And this is where communities come into play. As you would know, in Africa, we are very communal, even in the way societies run, right? Everybody comes together, bands together, we're involved. And this cascades into every aspect of life, including the professional side. So that was a very key insight where we realized if we want to be able to find people better, we could talk to communities. So we started working with communities, talked to our first community sometime in late 2021, and, tested our hypothesis, took a job from the global market, one of our early customers back then, and gave it to the community and said, can you find someone in your community that could fill this role? And the community leader said, of course, took it, went back, came back to us in let's say 24 hours, came back with a lot of amazing people. And it dawned on us, communities can find people way better than we ever can. And communities are so vital to the ecosystem, but they've been entirely overlooked. So we decided we were going to build for communities to be able to gain access to supply and use this to feed the global workforce. And then, of course, naturally, things start to come into each other. Started thinking about the needs of communities. What do communities need? Where do they struggle? Communities are great at nurturing. They are great at building people up, bringing people together and all of that. But they struggle with the last mile. Access to work being one of those things. So I would say this is where the pieces of what we have today started to come together and everything started to lock in. And from there, the general story became something that most people know today. Went on to raise other funding rounds. We've grown now to over 200 communities across most of Africa and still growing very fast. And this has given us, a huge scale on the supply side to be able to feed the global workforce in a good way. And this is our differentiator.
Fantastic. So you highlighted the importance of tech talent communities in providing opportunities. So what impact has the platform had in connecting African tech talent with companies on the continent and globally?
Well, impacts can be measured in many ways, right? And I'm sure this is something you would also probably want to ask. But I think we try to focus on the key metrics. So I'll say we have a few players in our value chain. We have the talent themselves. We have the communities that this talent belong to. We have the companies globally that's everywhere that need these people. So the way we measure impact would be per player. For the talent, we give them access to work, and we're trying out some new things with access to finance as well. So this is very direct value, something you cannot necessarily do by yourself. I love giving this example. The first person we ever placed for Porsche is in Kampala, Uganda. I haven't even been to Kampala myself, right? Wow. And what we like saying is this person is obviously good enough to work for Porsche. He's been there for almost 2 years now. He's paid a very hefty sum. He's paid a sum more than almost everybody in our company as well. Yes. It gives you a big dilemma. Should I be working in Propel or should I be in Propel's talent pool? But it's a beautiful mission anyway. But this is the way we like to look at it. If this person has been working for Porsche in Stuttgart for this long, it means this person is of value to the company. Now, will this person, who is obviously skilled, have sat down in Kampala and he's working remotely and applied to Porsche in Stuttgart to say he wants to work for them on his own? Maybe, maybe not, but it is quite unlikely because, again, you need to know that you can do these things, right, for you to even attempt to do them. That's one. Number two, even if this person did so, would he have been able to break through the natural biases, which are usually encoded into systems? He might have been filtered out because in the first place, it's not a natural thing. What we're trying to do is to disrupt the way companies can access talent, right? And on the third angle, will Porsche themselves have said, we need somebody with this particular skill set in this way, and will they have gone to Kampala instead? No. So it's very obvious the way, opportunities are being created here across every player in the chain. But the key thing here is the third player, which is very important. The communities now, when the communities now are able to generate value from people they already have access to. So someone from your community who the community has impacted into, either by training or developing or by nurturing through, building a sense of, belonging in some way, or by access to more learning or, just a general exposure, the community should be able to gain something from this. And one thing we've built into our model is what we call a positive feedback loop, where the community is able to now generate financial revenue from people getting placed into roles or people getting engagements on projects with companies. And this revenue goes back into the community as an entity. So the community now all of a sudden has more resources to do what they already love to do and what they've already been doing, rather than the community having to, just wait for grants, have one event a year and, go around asking for sponsors and the rest. So we're trying to help communities become more commercial because they play such a vital role. So once with this explanation, you can think about it across the entire value chain. It's a win-win-win. Talent get access to opportunity, are able to gain, access to a better life with better financial inclusion and have a seat at the global stage where they could also influence the development of technology for everybody. Communities are able to harness the value they already create and they already naturally create in that sense, because this is something they already exist to do. The communities are usually passion projects, but imagine being able to gain value from what is your passion. And thirdly, on the global stage, there's still a huge talent shortage. Like companies every day still struggle so much. So we do a very good job in trying to make companies across board understand that your problem can easily be solved by tapping into this direct talent pipeline that takes you into the veins of the ecosystem directly. And they win as well because they are able to grow more comfortably, scale, and, there's value created across board.
That sounds great. So how many people would you say you've supported to access these type of opportunities so far?
This year alone, we should be somewhere around 300 people right now.
Fantastic. So what's the mission or the aim for 2024?
A lot of lofty goals, if I can call it that way. So right now, we're still growing. Obviously, we've hit some good milestones, but we'll like to, scale them exponentially as well. There's still a huge bit of work to be done, even on the African continent, where we are reaching out to more communities, onboarding communities. And, in the process of this, there's a platform where these communities now exists. So we call it the infrastructure distribution layer. It's the distribution layer for communities. We are building the infrastructure in that sense where communities are sort of the manufacturers and we are sort of the distributors. There's a middle pipeline to connect into this global workforce, which we've also been able to crack. And we want to get more and more communities on board. We have, very good targets that we've discussed internally. And of course, because this is still a two-sided demand and supply model, it means if you're bringing more communities in, you need to be able to extend enough opportunities to keep everybody warm. So we are talking to more and more companies every day, exposing people to the beauty of the potential on the African continent. And we've had, a bit of success so far. Mercedes, Porsche, Stepstone, which is the third largest job board in the world after LinkedIn and Indeed, Siemens, Farfetch, and a host of other startups as well. So we don't only work with the big companies because everybody needs talent. We are also expanding that network as well. So there's a lot of work to be done on both sides. Internally, the team is growing. So yeah, it's a lot of big things ahead for us next year.
Look forward to seeing it. We've discussed the value that you provide and the impact. So if we take a few steps back, can you give us a brief overview of the services that you currently provide to your community and members?
Oh yeah, so it's simple. Access to work, and access to finance, simply. And it's in two basic ways. We want communities to be able to provide access to work for their members, but at the same time also be able to provide access to finance to keep their people developing and growing. And we have unique ways in which we've worked this out, even on a technical level. We focus on those two key pillars right now, not only because that is what we want to do and that's what we're good at doing, but that is also what is needed so critically. And beautiful thing is we feel like we have co-built this startup along with the really amazing communities in our ecosystem. They tell us exactly what is needed. They are the first to try out our product and our platform. They can essentially say, this feature you've built in here doesn't solve the need we have. So we have very direct feedback in that sense. So the two things we offer in terms of access to work and access to finance are two very critical things that we've been made to understand that communities need to keep growing. And it's important that we are able to address it in a way where we are not replacing communities, but rather facilitating the work they already do. So we are more like a silent player in this sense, just building underneath and having people tap into our infrastructure to be able to access the global workforce and also become sort of neobanks to their members, because there is a lot of data on people in the open talent economy that is easier for us to make sense of when it comes to determining credit eligibility and the rest. And we found ourselves in a very good position to really attack this problem and really open up this segment of the market as well.
Fantastic. So you've detailed that your services are centered around access to work and access to finance. So keeping on the theme of finance, you recently managed to successfully raise $2.5 million in seed funding.
Yeah.
What has this enabled you to do?
So our funding round earlier this year was very specific towards driving growth. We are a tech startup at the end of the day. There is a lot to be built. We have a lot of users and a lot of customers to build out for. And following the same venture model, this is the point where we drive deep in really building out capacity. So it's all been about building out capacity on the sales side, being able to give ourselves the exposure we need, to potential businesses, customers, companies, and make them see the huge and beautiful potential on the African continent. And also, discovering communities, reaching out to them, onboarding them, and building a platform that can thoroughly meet their needs in this sense. While in the midst of all of this, building out a company where people love to work, where people are excited for the mission. These things require money.
Yes.
So we talked to some investors, majorly European investors, and we're able to really show them the dream and the potential of what we want to build. And I'll say we very fortunately got a lot of beautiful interest from people who are deeply, in support of this mission and see why it needs to be done.
You mentioned driving growth and building capacity. Is this about expanding your offering in terms of market expansion or solidifying your position in the markets that you're already operating in?
I would say it's a bit of both. It's a bit of both. I'll be lying if I said it is 100% about driving deep and not driving wide.
Yes.
But it's also not just about driving wide. So it's always about the ratio, and these objectives change per time, as I assume they would with most startups or companies. Of course, for the places we already are in, we need to solidify our position. At the end of the day, we're still in the market. There will always be competition. And when you think about broadly the value we bring forward is, then it simply just means that is how broad our competition is, right? For everybody that is brought on board, there has to be deep value created for them. But at the same time, growth is also key because you need to be able to build a moat. And in some cases, one of the many ways to build a moat is also in your skill, especially when you're dealing with market dynamics on the demand and supply side. So it's a bit of both. We are expanding, very rapidly. We've covered a lot of ground this year. We want to do the same and even better next year. But at the same time, we're also, building deeper to ensure we have a very strong hand on, this beautiful thing that we've brought to the world.
Going back to your point in terms of building capacity, with the services that you provide, have there been any challenges in navigating the complexities of multi-country operations?
Of course, 100%. Yes.
What have those challenges been?
So first of all, if I take it internally, Propel is a team of almost 35 people, but we're spread across 9 countries. And we are spread across this, broad scope because we need to be, because we have some sort of operations across different regions in this sense. We have an ecosystem team that is focused on, finding, onboarding, managing, and working with communities. We have the talent team that, are more client-facing and deal with the individuals when they come into the pool and need to connect to access to work. We have the product team, which, needs a very, very deep connection in this sense. So when you think of it across board, you realize you're building something that needs a unique framework to operate. I think every company is different in this sense. You think about things like building culture internally, even though your team is literally from everywhere and spread across everywhere. You think about the different ways to build a remote distributed team. Are we building, co-location spots? Or can anybody simply just come from anywhere? How do you manage, the workflow, work delivery? How do you manage the intensity of work and all those things? So all of those are internal. But then there's also the other part of learning how to sell with different people from different places to different kinds of companies. We are a bit better at it now, but at some point it was almost like we were building an education course for potential customers.
Yes.
To even make them understand that it is even possible in the first place to work with people from this region that they know not too much about in this sense. And even with the communities we work with as well, it takes a lot of learning, especially on our part, understanding our customers and building according to what they need and being able to also understand the things that are possible now and the things that are not possible now. We have 1,000,001 ideas that we would love to implement, but again, things need to grow according to pace. So I think every startup and every company has or deals with the same challenges in this sense. There would always be unique things that you have to figure out on the fly, right? There are the standard general things of, how to raise funding, how to hire people, how to find people, and all of that. But there will always be the more nuanced challenges that every company or every startup would face and would have to navigate. And I think we are no different in that sense.
You mentioned that your team is spread across 9 countries, which is a great achievement. And partnerships are key to working successfully in a range of countries and offering the diverse range of services that you do. What strategies have been effective for you in terms of creating partnerships for global success?
As you might imagine, Propel is a platform that is built on the strength of networks. So across different parts of the chain, we have different kinds of partnerships. every community in our ecosystem is a partner, right? So they are our customers, but they are also partners because they handle their part of the system and we do our part to make things easier for them, right? So it goes both ways. Every community onboarded is a customer onboarded, but that's also a partnership discussion. And these things are handled individually. That is one. Even when you talk about the operational things, there are places where you need partnerships to make things work, especially when you consider the kind of unique operational model we're building. And also when it comes to the actual delivery chain of what we bring forward to companies, there are many aspects that require partnerships to make our model work because no single startup is an island in that case. It could be in terms of being able to cover remittances to different talent in different countries or even the communities themselves, as this is a very financial relationship. It could be in terms of managing things around relocation for some particular people who are moving into different companies. And it could be in terms of just facilitating the embedded finance layer that we are building out as well, where we already have some partnerships in place. I think partnerships are maybe to us more than most very critical in every single stage of what we've designed and built out here. So I don't think there's anything more particular than we just had to learn how to do it, and that's what we do. I would say a good thing, a very key thing is hiring people that are also experts in their domain, which is a place I would say we've gotten right so far. And we have some experts on the team who handle these partnership, business development conversations alongside myself.
If we move from looking externally at partnerships and look internally at the platform and technology, what have been the challenges that you've encountered building the infrastructure for this platform?
In terms of challenges in that regard, I would say some things take time, and usually things take a longer time. It's more likely for things to take a longer time than a shorter time. That's a major challenge, especially on the product development side. And this requires learning how to build a system of patience while ensuring that pace is maintained. I say this because compared to where we are today, what we had in mind was significantly different. And one key thing is being able to adapt to external feedback and being able to very quickly understand where what you might have built is not taking you in the direction you need to go, and being able to backtrack, reconstruct, and start afresh in the right direction. So that's been a major challenge. Again, I don't think this is a challenge that is particularly unique to Propel. I think almost every tech startup building out something interesting and innovative will face this, especially where you don't have a very obvious model to build after. Right. So a lot of the things that we're building and a lot of the ways we're building are things that we haven't even experienced before. So we work with a lot of feedback and deep details on the supply side, which are the communities and their representatives, to know what we need to build. And this means more often than not, you need a couple of iterations to get it right in this case. Balancing all of that with the pace and expectations of the stakeholders, including even the investors, is a challenge. But I think the further along you go, the more you get a hang of it and how this whole thing works, and you learn to just manage these processes better. So internally, in terms of building and how all of that works is one thing, and even in terms of even just managing the team.
Yes.
In terms of just managing the team is also a learning curve, because you need to know how to make some things work with particular constraints. Remote work is the thing that's here to stay. But at the same time, it's a system that has not 100% settled in what it will be. We are not yet in the future of work. We are progressing very rapidly into the future of work. So along the way, there will be so many learnings, and every learning comes in form of a challenge in that case. And how you respond to it determines how far you go.
You mentioned that things take time to build and patience is required. We also know that the tech industry is constantly evolving. So how do you stay ahead of trends and adapt to meet the changing needs of tech professionals and companies?
Two things: keep your eyes open and keep your ears open. Listen to your users. An advantage any company building tech product will have is if you have a direct line of communication or a direct line of feedback to your users. you get to learn things quicker and in advance than what the market will tell you. And many times it's always costlier if you wait for the market to, really correct you. So I would say that's a very core principle, and not even only on the supply side, understanding and this would also apply to every business in a two-sided space. Knowing what the global workforce is saying and what demands are there, and being able to match this to the supply is a very key thing. It helps you not be left in the dust, and it also helps you to stand out when you are moving forward in terms of building out the business, because you know exactly what you're saying and you have your sources to back it up. But to counter this in a little way, it's also very important to have a very clear vision and not be a leaf in the wind. There's a reason why the vision is very concrete. There's a reason why the mission is very clear. And it's always good to have that as an anchor. And this is a way we even practice the mindset internally for the team. There is always, open discussion, right? Many times I serve as more of the anchor, and, other people come up with the new things, and we always try to find a balance in between so we don't veer too far off, but at the same time, we don't become stale in our approach and in our thinking. So this internal dynamic, which is open to everyone on the team, regardless of your level or your experience, is something that we practice a lot.
You mentioned having a clear vision and listening to your users. Keeping on the theme of trends, are there any trends in Africa's tech talent space that you're currently seeing and excited about?
Of course, there always will be. And the thing about the African tech talent space is it's in a faster evolutionary process than the rest of the world. But a very interesting trend is, we also seen that communities spring up in response to the global trends, right? So AI, Web3 are the more recent trends to have gone through a lot of explosion in the past, let's say 3-4 years, right? Well, 2-3 years. And what you naturally realize, if you have a keen eye on the market, is you start to have more of these communities spring forth, because communities are driven by interests, right? A community is a usually close group of people with aligned interests. So once something that is interesting becomes more prominent, you see more communities congregating around these ideas, and being able to quickly tap into, the formation, the foundation of those communities helps you stay ahead. And in our case, even outside on the global landscape where we play. It's been quite interesting to see how quickly the ecosystem reacts to new technologies and new frameworks, but also seeing how the intrinsic growth of communities spins off more communities as well. I'll say this has been the more interesting part of what I've seen this year, where we've realized that we are not only trying to gain market share, but we are actually creating new market value. If a community grows big enough, people in that community, it's just the same way it works in startups, right? The number of alumni from, the biggest, most successful startups that go on to create new things. It's like splinter cell, ideology. And this thing also works on the community side as well. So there's a lot of potential for growth in this regard. It's just one of the many interesting trends we see. There are also many interesting trends in terms of how companies are now adapting and coming around to settle into this reality of what the future workforce can be, and their understanding of the open talent economy, particularly in emerging markets like Africa. So a lot of new trends in that regard. Some of them we're holding close to our chests because this is still a competitive landscape.
Fantastic. So if we go from current trends and look at the future, where do you see Africa's tech talent space, say, in 5 years' time, particularly in relation to what you're doing in building online communities?
Yeah, it's going to the very top. The African tech talent ecosystem is going to the very top. A lot of facts support this. If we're looking at even just simple population stats, it's a converse relationship with the global workforce. Most European companies now are seeing not only shrinking work pools, but shrinking populations overall, declining population growth rates and declining population rates in some cases. So all of these all only point to one thing. But apart from just the quantity, the quality and the rate of growth of the quality is so promising. It's so promising, and it creates a lot of excitement for where things will be. And I think there's a report study that came out this year that shows that in how many decades, 25% of the world's entire workforce will be in Africa. That's
Yes,
an
yes.
amazing stat, right? So we feel excited to be players in this space, in something that has so much potential down the line. If we're able to play our part in helping organize, curate the ecosystem, it makes it more visible to the global workforce. It makes it more accessible, easier to navigate from companies and from economies that would naturally be active to diving into something new or what they do not know. I see that as the role we are playing, right? We're trying to curate this ecosystem, de-risk it to people that need access to it. And this would only contribute to the growth and the trend. So I feel a lot of players in this space are critical to the mission of what Africa can deliver. And I actually just feel very privileged to be one of those players in Propel right now. And everybody on the team feels the exact same way.
I know you've just slightly touched on this, but I was hoping we could take a closer look. What role or how do you see Propel's role evolving in the tech landscape in the next 5 years?
Yeah, well, I mean, it's no secret on what we're already trying to do. A lot changes in 5 years, and particularly when you're a tech startup, because you have to always be nimble as a tech startup. But we see ourselves, being a very key player, connecting the world into this ecosystem. The ecosystem is going to grow no matter what happens. It is already growing at a rapid pace. So it needs an outlet as well. We want to be one of those outlets, right? We want to be a primary outlet that companies can think. We want to tap into, the power of this continent. We want to leverage this ecosystem, add value to it in a sustainable way, and also be able to gain value from it. We want Africa to be more connected to the global workforce. My co-founder likes saying that, if technology is going to work for everyone, it has to be built by everyone. And, Africa needs a seat at the global table as well. So in 5 years, I would really love for our vision to be actualized, to a considerable extent, if not fully. And, as of now, we intend to stay on this mission path. There will, or there could be, some changes in the actual model, right? Which is very normal because as a company, you need to keep on adapting as well. But I think the vision and the mission will remain. We are trying to be that point of connection, that portal into this amazing tech ecosystem. And we want communities to remain at the center of this drive.
Quote of the week.
As people, we often have quotes, mantras, African proverbs, or affirmations that keep us going when times are challenging or when times are good. Do you have one that you can share with us today?
That's interesting. I don't consider myself, the wisest person with all the quotes. But I think this is more of a principle that I have as an individual. So this is not even Sunkanmi, CEO or co-founder of Propel or whatever. Personally, for me, I feel excellence is not an option, and whatever is worth doing at all is worth doing well. I think it's my mom that hammered this into my head, a long time ago. So if you're going to bother doing anything at all, understand that perfection is not attainable, but get as close to it as humanly possible. Meaning, if you've done something, ask yourself, is this the best possible version of this thing I could do right now? It's a tricky thing in that sense because you stand the risk of falling into this cycle of always building and never shipping, right? But there is that sweet spot where, in terms of being committed to output, but also committed to quality, there is a point where you know what it is. So it's something that is my standard in my personal life. If I would bother doing something at all, I will do it properly, right? And it's something that I've also taken into my professional life as well. And it's what I also try to imbibe into, my amazing teammates that work with me.
Fantastic. It's one that I agree with. Thank you for sharing that. So, we've come to the end of today's conversation, and I was wondering if you have any closing remarks and final call to action for people who are interested in the work that you're doing.
Yes, definitely. I'm always reachable, always available. You can find me on LinkedIn. My name is thankfully a bit unique, so there's not too many of me. It's Sunkanmi Ola with two N's, just by the way. I'm always open to discussion, or you can reach out to, the team. We're very, very easy to find. If you're a community and you would like to, join this mission and come into the ecosystem, you can simply visit propel.community. And if you're a company looking to leverage the value and power of this ecosystem, you can, reach out to me directly as well. I'm always happy to have conversations.
So, thank you for joining me today, Sunkanmi. I've enjoyed discussing Propel's journey in addressing the last mile challenges faced by tech communities in Africa, and also looking forward to seeing the positive impact you'll have on the careers and the growth of the tech talent community across the continent.
Perfect.
Speak soon.
Okay, bye-bye.
Thank you to everyone who has listened and stayed tuned to the podcast. If you've enjoyed this episode, please subscribe, share, or tell a friend about it. You can also rate, review us in Apple Podcasts or wherever you download your podcast. Thank you, and see you next week for the Unlocking Africa podcast.